You can join us on that Sunday morning, 10:45 on Easter. Good Friday, we will be here with one service as well. We'll send out more information the next couple weeks about all these different things. But we're so glad we're here together today. This is the day that God has given to us, right? We don't have any other day. It's right now today. And so let me pray for us and ask the Lord to help us enjoy Him and enjoy the things He's given to us together. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you in heaven that one day we know that you will return to take us to be with you in heaven. We do thank you that today is the day that you have given us, and that you have richly blessed us beyond what any one of us deserve. And so as we give of our tithes and offerings today, as we give of our talents and serving, we do thank you that you have ultimately served us in giving your life for us. And as when we give and as we serve, we're just mimicking you. Help us, Father, to imitate your generosity in every area of our life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me save that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light.
Be thou my wisdom, be thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one.
Riches thy need not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only, be first in my heart. I, King of heaven, my treasure, thou art. O God, be my everything, be my delight. In Jesus, my glory, my soul satisfied. O God, be my everything, be my delight. In Jesus, my glory, my soul satisfied. Thy King of heaven, thy victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, O bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, Lord, ever befall. Still be my vision,
that's our prayer, is that you'd be our delight. You would be our satisfaction. You would be the one that we run to when we're tired, when we're excited, when we're celebrating, when we're mournful, when we're discouraged, when we're triumphant, that you'd be the one that we run to at all times. You say in your word that you are a refuge at all times, and you say to trust in you at all times in Psalm 68. And so, Father, we come to you not because we're great, not because we look nice, not because we've done good things this past week, but we come to you because your Son was good to us on our behalf. He was good when we were bad. He was patient when we were impatient. He died the death that we deserved, and he lived the life that we could not live. And so, Jesus, we come to you this morning worshiping you. We want to hear you. We want to have open hearts to hear what you have to say. So open our minds. Give us more of you. Help us to see you as you are this morning. We just commit this time to you, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Y'all can have a seat.
Well, good morning to all of you. It's good to be with you this morning. Why don't we greet the people who you're sitting next to? Make sure you know who it is that you're with this morning. Say hi. Chapter 5 is going to be looking at this morning, and what an important topic we're talking about. Let me read this for us, and then we'll get into it this morning. Proverbs 5 says this, "My son, be attentive to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps follow the path to Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life, her ways wander and she does not know it. And now, O sons, listen to me. Do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others, and your years to the merciless, lest strangers take their fill of your strength, and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. And at the end of your life you groan, when your flesh and your body are consumed, and you say, how I hated discipline, and my heart despised reproof. I did not listen to the voice of my teachers, or incline my ear to my instructors. I'm at the brink of utter ruin, the assembled congregation. Drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. A lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breast fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman, and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? For a man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all his paths. The iniquities of the wicked ensnare him. He is held fast in the cords of his sin. He dies for lack of discipline. Because of his great folly, he is led astray. Well, this is an important topic for us to be talking about this morning, and apparently it was so hot in the first service that we had to open the windows. And some of you arrived and we were still talking about it. And so here we are getting into this very important passage in Proverbs. Proverbs is this incredible book, and often what will happen as going here on out is that there are little bits and pieces of topics that we could be talking about, and so we've chosen this one because this is such an important topic for us to be dealing with this morning. It is the topic of sexual passion. And here's what we know, that you and I live in a sex-saturated society. All around us. You don't have to go very far. You could go to places like Las Vegas and other places where it's just blatantly obvious that sex has saturated that society, that city. But you don't have to go that far. You can go to Uptown and realize it's right there. You would think that with all of the saturation in our society, that we would have a good handle on this. But the reality is that as much as we live in this sex-saturated society, we also live in a very sex-saturated society. And I'm standing before you knowing that many of you, like me, have had a past. Maybe one that you're not proud of, or one that you've repented of, but maybe hurt and pain and shame still exist from either things that you did or things that were done to you. Perhaps this morning you're currently involved with something that you know is clearly wrong and you're hiding in the darkness, things you need to repent of. Or perhaps this morning you're here and you're entertaining ideas and thoughts privately about sexual fantasies that you may be having, hoping that it will become a reality. And so this morning as I stand before you as a man who's just as broken as you. And this week I've been looking at this topic and I've had the chance to prepare for it. And so for the next 25, 30 minutes, I'm going to say some things that might raise your eyebrows, might make you squirm. But it's okay. I'm prepared to say things and you can just listen. How about that? Okay? And you can just soak it in and think as I talk about it. But we have to talk about this topic. When I was doing junior high ministry a long time ago, I did about 4 or 5 weeks on sexuality. And how important it is for our junior high kids, even today, to be talking about this issue. But not just for our junior high kids, we as adults and college students and singles among us, we all need this. And so we have to understand this, that this is a very limited passage in the Bible that talks about sexuality. The Bible is full of sex, so to speak. We could say it that way. Okay? Because the Bible is not taboo. This topic is not taboo in the Bible. It's from the Song of Solomon. It's all over Proverbs. It's in other places that there's so much talk about it. But sometimes what happens is that in the church, we don't want to talk about this. We say, well, it's just, I don't want to talk about it. It makes me squirm and nervous. But friends, we got to lean into this because there is so much brokenness. But the brokenness leads us to the hope of the gospel. That there can be healing. There can be forgiveness. There is grace. And so this morning as we go through this, you need to understand that this is not a message that just ends hopeless. It's a message that ends with great hope, no matter where you are. Here's what I want us to talk away this morning. One big thing I want you to walk away with is this. God created all the intoxicating pleasures of sex. But sin is like a parasite. And it calls the mangled mess good. Well, if we go back to the beginning of Genesis, and we looked at that when God created male and female, He also created them as sexual beings, and they were naked and they were unashamed. And so God created this area of our life that is enjoyable and pleasurable. He didn't have to make it that way. He could have made it unpleasurable and unenjoyable, but He made it an enjoyable experience for us physically. He's the one who created it this way. But sin is a parasite, and what that sin has done is it makes a mangled mess of something that God has designed as good, and then what happens is that we call the mangled mess good. We understand how that works, is that we live in this world that is saying everything that God has created that is good, it gets twisted and manipulated into things that now are not good, but we call them good. Proverbs speaks to one area of sin in this area of our life, and it is the sin of adultery. Let me be abundantly clear. We as a church believe that God has designed marriage to be between one man and one woman for a lifetime. It is that simple to me. It is in the scriptures. I didn't make it up. I believe what the Bible says. This is who we are as a church. And so with this topic here, in Proverbs chapter 5, is dealing with the sexual sin of adultery, which is basically this, that it is sex or a sexual interaction between a married person and someone that he or she is not married to. Okay, that's what adultery is. Now, the Bible talks about other forms of sexual sin, things like fornication, bestiality, and masturbation. This is the reality the Scriptures talk about. This passage here doesn't talk about those things. It's talking about adultery. A sexual interaction between a married person that the person is not married to. Proverbs chapter 5 is also a very frank conversation between a father and a son. That son is probably single. And so for our college students who are here and those that are single in this room, we need to understand that just because you are not married doesn't mean that this doesn't apply to you. In fact, it might apply even more to you. Because contextually, Solomon here is talking to his son. You see it in verse 1. My son. And then again, he says it later on. My son. So he's talking to his single son, maybe even a teenage son, about sexual passion. I remember when I was 12, and my dad sat down with me and gave me the birds and the bees talk. We could say hashtag awkward, right? Because here I am, my dad is explaining to me the mechanics of sex. And as a 12-year-old, it's just plain gross, right? It's just like, no thanks, Dad. Thank you for that. No. This year, Proverbs chapter 5 is not a talk about the mechanics of how to have sex. It's talking about sexual passion and how to deal with that and how to handle this issue of our life. And so that's good for the single person. It's also good for the married person. It's good for all of us. Now, the application here for us, I'm going to make this morning, is broader than just for men, but it's for men and women. Although Solomon is talking to his son, I will make it broader than that and make it bigger to include both men and women. Now, the picture here in Proverbs chapter 5 is of a woman seducing a man. That's the image. That's what's going on that Solomon is addressing. Now, we know always those roles can be reversed. A man seducing a woman. So these are the things. This is why we can make a broader application to how men and women, young and old, are to interact with one another. Now, I lay all that groundwork for you this morning because it's very important before we get right into it. You understand where we're going and how we're going to get there. First thing I want you to see is this, and this is not difficult points for us, but they are right in the text. It is this, that we are all vulnerable to the sweet bait and bitter hook of sexual temptation. It's verses 1 to 6. What we see in verses 1 to 3 is that there's this sweet bait of sexual temptation. It's this poetic imagery you can see of sultry lips. Now, afterwards, no one in the first service could explain this to me, of duck lips. Some of you know what I'm talking about, some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. But I'll demonstrate for you. Not very well. You've seen these images, right? I see them all the time on social media, on my kids' feeds. I'm like, what is that? Is that supposed to be like sexy? I don't know what this is. But it's lips that are there. So if you know what that's supposed to mean, maybe you can explain it to me later if you want to. You can. But the imagery here is of lips, and you can see what's going on with this woman's lips. First of all, see they're dripping with honey. They're sweet. It's just there, and then you see also she's got smooth speech. It's just her lips and what's coming out of her mouth is smooth. It's oily. It's just sweet. It's this picture of just this sultry messages that are coming out of this woman's mouth. And it's really quite erotic, the way he's describing the messages that are coming. But the father is helping his son realize there are messages that are going to come to you that are going to be sweet. They're going to feel like smooth oil. It's going to sound so good. You've got a sex drive and it's strong. And that message from that woman's going to sound like she can meet it. Now, I find something oddly comforting about this. I'm not like, that's weird. What are you talking about? It's oddly comforting because there's nothing new under the sun, friends. Sexual temptation has been around for a very long time. It's also scary, isn't it? It's scary. It's scary because it's been around for a long time. And over time, it's had time to morph and to change. Because you and I, maybe you're attracted to the duck lips, I don't know, maybe you are. But certainly, the forbidden woman in that category can come to us not only face to face with a person on the street, or not just in our workplace, or not just in the gym, but many times to the many computers that we hold in our bag. Things like sexting, pornographic websites, social media feeds, banner ads, rom-coms, TV shows, movies, our sports magazines, all with the purpose of somehow accentuating the female body. It may not be lips, it may just be another part of the body. And the message has always been the same since Solomon's day. The message is this: you have passion for sex, and she can fulfill it. You want it? Come and get it. It's sweet, flattering. There it is. All you have to do is come and get it. But the sweet bait hides the bitter hook. The bitter hook is in verses 4 to 6, and we see this. There's this poetic contrast between verses 3 and 4, and it's all meant to drive home the point that sexual temptation is a bait and switch. The bait is sweet, but the hook is bitter. And so in verse 3, we see that although her lips might be dripping with honey, and it seems sweet in reality, in verse 4 what we see is that she's bitter as wormwood. Now wormwood is an herb that was used to wean a child from breastfeeding. And so it was meant to turn the child away from the mother. Like, this is disgusting. I don't want this anymore. That was the purpose of wormwood. That's what her speech is actually like. It presents itself as sweet flattery. It's this nice sweet message, but in the end, it is so bitter and it is so deadly that in verse 4, what we also see is that although her speech is smooth as oil, it's actually a double-edged sword, which means she's going to kill you. She'll suck the life out of you. She lays this trap of sweet speech only to turn around and trap you and to take you down to hell with her. Sweet flavored poison. Those who wander down her path will end up dead, whether actually, mentally, spiritually. This is the danger that we all face, isn't it? And I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's just that we don't talk about it enough. Maybe you didn't have a dad who opened your eyes to the reality and said, you know what? There are things in your life that you are going to face, and you need to be on your guard. Friends, this passage this week has made me be on high alert. Because I'm just as vulnerable as you are. And the message isn't difficult. What's hard for us is to actually apply it to our life. Years ago, I was serving at a church up in Chicago with a man by the name of Ken Hughes. And Ken Hughes was a wise pastor in the ministry for a very long time. And I remember he sat down with the young guys on staff. And he said to me very clearly and to the whole group, he said, Garrett, the rest of you, I'd rather have you die than suffer a moral disgrace and be disrepute to Jesus Christ. Wise words from a wise pastor. I'd rather have you die than give into a moral failure and bring disgrace to the name of Christ. This passage has reminded me of that in this week, that there are messages in my life, and there's messages in your life, and if we're not aware of them, and we don't pay attention to them, and you didn't have a dad, then let me be your pastor and warn you, there are messages in your life that are going to suck you in to say, this is sweet, but in the end, friends, it will kill you. It is a bitter hook. And there's all these devastating repercussions. And Solomon lines them up for us. Look at verses 9 to 14. I'm just going to run through these very quickly because this is a matter of life and death. And I'm not joking about that. Sometimes I get really serious, and sometimes you might think I'm too serious sometimes. But friends, this is not a topic to mess around with. And so I'm serious about it because Solomon is serious about it. He says there's devastating repercussions. And he says this in verse 9. He says, your honor will be given to others. Which basically means your reputation, it will be taken from you if you give in to sexual temptation. Think of the number of people, either in ministry or not, who have lost their reputation because they involved themselves in some sort of sexual engagement with something. It's terrible, isn't it? Social repercussions. Verse 9, your years are going to be given to the merciless, which means that you're giving into this. You're going to give the best years of your life, your best energy towards people who care nothing for you. What a warning, right? Verse 10, your strength is going to be given to strangers. You're going to have no close companions. Isolation from true community, a dark world that you will live in. Enslaved to a foreigner, it says in verse 10, which means that if you are married, your home life is going to be full of people who don't know you. You're going to live in the dark. In verse 11, your flesh and your body are going to be consumed. There will be physically, bodily harm to you engaged in these type of things. Friends, if that doesn't make your hair on the back of your neck stand up at some point, then we need to meditate on that more and think about the repercussions that he's talking about here. I can't tell you the number of times that people come to me as a pastor and say, Pastor, I'm struggling with pornography, but it doesn't hurt anyone. My hormones are raging. I need a physical outlet, and pornography is just safe. Friends, there is nothing safe about it. And if you don't listen to verses 9 to 14 and understand that there are devastating repercussions for you in your life, then you need to have your sensitivities awakened and open up your eyes to the reality that there's nothing that's done in secret that God doesn't already know, and there's obviously devastating repercussions of it. Friends, it is impossible to play with fire and not get burned. Proverbs 6:26 would say this, that a married woman hunts down a precious life. Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes and not be burned? Or can one walk on a hot coal and his feet not be scorched? So as he who goes to his neighbor's wife, none who touches her will go unpunished. It's fire. In the right place, it's good. In the wrong place, destructive. This is real. Because when you walk out of these doors today, you will be faced with temptation. The temptation is not the sin. You will always face temptation. Left and right. The temptation only becomes sin when you give into it. And so just because it swirls around us doesn't mean that you have sinned. You're guilty of it when you've actually gone there and played with the fire. Second thing I want us to see is this in verses 7 to 20, is that God gives form and freedom to sex, not to squelch sexual and sensual passion, but to intensify it. So there's a form that is really laid out in verses 7 to 14 that says, okay, this is a reality, this is the things that we face in life, and there's a particular form to these sensual pleasures in the form. I will describe it this way, keep hands off. Hands off. There's a warning here not to flirt with sexual temptation when Solomon says, don't go near the door of her house. And so there's an actual physical going somewhere in his situation. It led somewhere right to the point where temptation was in front of him. And the warning from the father to the son is just don't go there. Don't let your feet go to places where you might be tempted. And so it's easy to flirt with sexual temptation because you and I don't actually have to leave our homes to go near the door. We go near the door of sexual sin by entertaining thoughts, ideas, situations, locations where we might engage in some sort of sexual encounter. We think we're safe because we don't actually have to go to the door. We can just hide behind the door. You know what I mean? If anyone thinks we're above sexual stupidity, we're asking. Wisdom is not difficult. Keep your hands off. Don't go there. Jesus would raise the bar even higher on our sexual purity. Sermon on the Mount. The Pharisees believed that they were living a life of purity simply because they hadn't had sex with someone that was outside of marriage. But in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says that it's possible to commit adultery in your heart with lustful love. The look of lust, according to Jesus, is equal to committing adultery. And so lust, without going any farther, is like coming to the door of the house. It's saying, I'm going to put myself in that position. But Jesus would say, if you're in that position and you give into it, then you have crossed the line. So there's always a form, and the form is hands off. It's not free form, is it? There's a form that God has given to us, but then the form is also freedom. And both the form and the freedom are not meant to squelch sensual passion, but to intensify it. In verses 15 to 20, then, we see what the freedom is. And if the form is keep hands off, then the freedom is keep your hands on. In verses 15 to 20, we look at these and go, hold up, are these actually in the Bible? Like, Pastor Nate, did you actually read that a few minutes ago? Because that was one of Go back around it? I mean, come on, like, our typical message to combat sexual passion is to suppress it. That's sometimes what we tell our children and our youth growing up, say, hey, you've got sexual passion, just push it down. And that's our typical message, to say, well, I'm just going to push it down, almost like trying to push a floaty down a pool. It's not possible. It's going to just pop somewhere else. Christians are not anti-sex. This passage gives us such great freedom. We are very much pro-sex. The Father's not saying to his son here, hey son, watch out, there's temptation out there, you're going to face all kinds of things, so all you have to do is have an iron will of determination, you're going to beat this thing down. That's not what the Father is saying. The Father is saying, combat sex with sex. Woo, what a message, right? Wow, thanks, Dad. But the Father's wisdom is not a life of suppression of sexual passion, nor is it a life of sexual exploration, which you need to hear that loud and clear. He's not saying, the freedom is anywhere you want, just explore, just do it, whatever you want. It's free form. No, God's remedy for your thirst for sex is sex, but not any kind of sex at any time with anyone you want. He's saying very clearly in verses 15 to 17, drink water from your own cistern. Which we can take to mean, make love to your wife. You want to have a great sex life? Get married, have sex. Right? I mean, that's what he's saying. This sweet water metaphor is used to describe how sex should be satisfying in marriage. Now, hear me loud and clear. It's not problem-free. It's not without its awkward moments and just strange things that kind of sometimes happen. But he's simply saying your thirst should take place in this relationship only. And he's not saying take a sip. Go! You want to have really great sex, if possible, by drinking from your own cistern. Such a positive view, isn't it? It's life-giving. And if you're a young person here, it should be life-giving to you. It's not meant to make you feel like you should have a life of suppression, but it actually has something to say to our culture. It's so countercultural that it actually speaks into culture, isn't it? Our culture says this: sex in marriage is boring. Sex in marriage is lifeless, it's predictable, toothbrush, foreplay. But the message here is so different. And friends, if we could embrace what 15 to 20 is saying, how different would we be? Because in reality, making love to your wife is the greatest, most thrilling sexual experience you will ever have. It's the freedom. It's free, isn't it? God's rich blessing over the marriage bed. And actually, I'll go as far to say this, that you can worship God while having sex with your spouse. I mean, how would that change things, right? Sex is a sign of glory. That's why I believe that. All parts of creation, from beautiful hills, from mountains to trees, to everything we see in creation, from beautiful music to art, all these other things are sign glories. They point to some other greater glory. Sex is one of those sign glories. It's supposed to point to some other greater union, some other greater pleasure in life. Friends, there is something better than having sex. It's Jesus. Anyway, that's weird. It's not weird. It's not weird, because sex is a sign of glory. Friends, if you are single here this morning, you are a college student, please understand this: sex is not glory land. It's not the promised land. It's a part of being human. It's part of how God has created us. But it's a sign of glory. It points us to the ultimate pleasure of being in Christ, because you know what? One day, marriage will not exist. In heaven. And you know what? There probably will be no sex in heaven. But you know what? We'll have pleasures forevermore at the right hand of God. And so if you are single here this morning, please understand this: that Jesus is better than sex. You need to hear that message. Because it's not perfect. And it's not meant to do everything that we have inside of us for satisfaction. It points us to something else. Now, with all of that in mind, 18 to 20 describes to us the quality and the quantity of sex. Look at these verses because they're pretty erotic. I mean, I didn't write these things, so I'm just going to explain them, and you can laugh with me with them if you want to. It's fine. First, he compares his wife to a deer or a doe, which is a bit of a strange analogy for us. It may not trend into our ears because some of you might actually hunt deer, and you hang the antlers over your fireplace. You're like, oh, this is great. You're like, I don't get it, right? But the point for us is that the physical features of your spouse, whatever you find attractive, okay, because people find different things attractive, enjoy those things. It should be attractive. Your eyes should be satisfied with the visual pleasure of your spouse. And in fact, your spouse is your only legitimate place of visual satisfaction. So enjoy. Enjoy. Notice what he says here too, is that this quality is actually tied to the woman's breasts. I didn't say it, okay? He did. So he says, fill, delight, be intoxicated, quality of just, the woman's breast, he's saying, enjoy yourself. And then he goes on to say, at all times and always. So it's quantity. It's never like, well, sometimes and sometimes not. It's like all the time. So when you get married, drop all sexual inhibitions. Go for it. Have sex. Enjoy it. And have it a lot. But in the right context. Because verse 20 will challenge us. Why settle for the imitation love of a forbidden woman when real pleasure is literally at your fingertips? Embracing the bosom of indulgence leads to death, but embracing the bosom of your wife leads to delight, joy, and fulfillment. So again, let me remind you, these are broad categories. I'm making it broader than just one or the other. It's saying very clearly that there's a freedom. There's a freedom, there's also form. And it's meant to intensify the pleasure that we have. Now, I want to say this at the end here as we think about this topic, because I realize very clearly that this topic itself, simply by me talking about it, can raise all kinds of things inside of you. And I don't know your story, and you don't know my story. But I do know this, that this area of our life, there's a lot of hurt. And there's a lot of shame. And there's a lot of things in your life that you feel like, I've gone too far. I toed the line, or I'm unsatisfied. The number of people here with your different stories is so varied. But I do know this, that whatever your past is, you can be forgiven. And I do know this, that currently, if you are involved with something that you know is wrong, you can have victory over that sin. Because Jesus was victorious. So maybe there's been things in your life that have been done to you. I mean, the opportunities for these things to just swirl around and make a mess of our life. Maybe your life has been made a mess of by someone else sinning against you. And you come in this morning and there's shame. You're like, you know what? Like, I don't even want to deal with this because there's so much shame in my life. Verse 21. If you look at verse 21 with me, it says this, for a man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all of his past. We can look at them and say, well, that's like this doom and gloom lightning bolts. Like, but friends, I want us to understand this about verse 21, that this is a grace. It is a grace because whether you've got past or current, whether you've got something that happened in your life, you have a God who knows you. You have a God who sees you. You have a God who wants you. There are so many people who either they're shameful, they're past, they're guilty, something's done to them, and it's easy to feel like nobody wants me. I'm just kind of worn out. Who wants me? And I want to tell you very clearly that God wants you. He sees you. And the snares that he says here that he wraps around your feet can be loosened. Because at the cross, Jesus died for our forgiveness. But on the cross, Jesus also took the shame of our sin. And so if you come this morning, you're like, I'm just ashamed. I understand very clearly that Jesus bore shame, your sin. And you can be forgiven of your past. You can have victory. You are accepted because of what Christ has done for you on the cross. Nobody is out of reach. The world we live in is so full of brokenness, but nobody's beyond the hope and the healing of God's grace. Communion this morning, as we take communion, is just a reminder to us of that grace that's been given to us at the cross. It's just a small reminder of a little cracker, a little juice, but it's a reminder to us that, you know what? There's hope, there's healing, there's grace, there's forgiveness for you and for me. And so run to the cross. You don't have to be ashamed. Find hope and find healing because of what Jesus has done for you. And the snares of sin can be released from you. And you can walk in freedom. You're free to be free because of what Christ has done for you on the cross. Let me pray for us, and then we'll take communion together. Father in heaven, I thank you that we have verse 21 to meditate on and to dwell upon. We come this morning in the quietness of our hearts, knowing that this is an area for many of us that can be hurtful. And so we come this morning knowing that your grace is sufficient for us, seen at the cross. For the snares of sin were unleashed from us because of what Jesus has done for us. Grace, forgiveness, freedom, shame undone. And I pray for anyone here this morning who is walking in a path of life that is leading them down a path that is going to death. I pray that you would rescue them, that you would redeem them, that you would heal them, that you would show them all that you have done for them on the cross, and that you would heal where brokenness might reign, that your grace would now reign. Thank you that you know us, that you ponder our path, and you save us from destruction. And so as you take communion this morning, would you help us to cling to that grace? In Jesus' name.